Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Poetry at the Albany Library. Thank you for all being here. I'm just feeling so grateful for this community of people and the warmth between all of us, and the range of poetry and ideas that are shared. And so thank you. And it's been a good season, and you guys really make it happen. You're really the energy behind this continuing to continue. So tonight, first of all, thank you to Friends of the Albany Library. I cannot say strongly enough how grateful we are and need to be. They make this possible. They really do make this possible. So thank you, friends. All right, tonight we have two poets who are going to read on Poetry of Place, Northern California and its Golden Gate. This seems a lovely introduction to summer, when there is kind of a heightened awareness of place, whether we stay at home, living in this beautiful area that we're so blessed to be in, or go wandering. So we have Iris Dunkel and Terry Lucas. Iris Jamal Dunkel and Terry Lucas. Terry Lucas is going to read first. Terry Lucas has a book in this room. He has other books as well, but this is the one he's primarily going to read from tonight. And it has at its center a series of poems about the Golden Gate Bridge, which have brought great praise. And I am going to read just a little bit here. Alicia Ostrecker describes this as a breathtaking sequence of poems. I imagine the ghosts of Hart Crane and Larry Levis welcoming Terry Lucas to their fraternity. And so tonight we will be welcoming him here, which will be a great segue, but I want to read what Gerald Stern has to say. The central series is called The Gate. The Gate is an enormous poem. The language is absolutely lovely, unusual, evocative of Hart Crane. This poem is entirely Hart. And with that, I'm very happy to have Terry Lucas here.
Yeah, but is he any good? That's what I want to know. Okay. Thank you for being here. We are heartened to see the crowd here tonight, and I have been attending the Albany Library Poetry Series for a few years, and one of the reasons that I make the trek all the way from Marin is all of you. You know, this reading actually, the open mic readers are as good as the featured readers in many, many places. And that's very unique. If you've had to sit through, open mic readings before and you were kind of cringing, but every one of you makes a contribution to tonight. So I thank you for being here. And of course, I thank Catherine for the invitation. I thank Iris Dunkel for the privilege of reading with her. Iris is, I'm fortunate enough to be one of the editors of Trailhouse Press, and we were fortunate enough to publish Iris's first book, and now we're going to be publishing her third book. So I've known Iris for some time, so it's a privilege to read with her. I have kind of a rule that whenever I read, I usually don't make comments before a poem. It's just kind of a quirk. I would rather just read the poem and let the poem speak for itself. And if I have any comments to maybe make them afterwards. But I'm going to depart from that a little bit this evening for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that I'm going to read mainly from the center section of In This Room, which, as you've already heard, centers on the Golden Gate Bridge. And I came in costume, so I'm wearing my Golden Gate Bridge shirt that my partner bought me in Santa Cruz at a little tiny shop. But so many of the poems in the center section seem dark to me, okay? They really do. And what these poems are, they are basically excerpts from a much longer work that is a book-length poem. It is unpublished. It has won, it was a finalist in a couple of contests, but it's never been published as a standalone. So whenever, like many of you, when I spread out all of my papers on my den floor, and I was putting together this book, I just excerpted this book-length poem as the center section. But many of the poems are so dark, and in light, I've been really wrestling for 24 to 48 hours in light of the horrific situation from Orlando. I felt, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to read some very dark poems about death. And how am I going to handle that? How's the audience going to handle that? So what I did was, you're going to be the recipient tonight of the first time that I've read this sequence in this manner. Because in the longer book-length poem, I have interspersed crossouts from Hart Crane's book-length poem, The Bridge. Okay? And I've never actually read those with this sequence. And they are very hopeful poems. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to be an experiment, and I'm going to be watching your faces and watching your eyes, and if you're with me, I'll continue doing it. If not, I'm just going to throw these out and just read the sequence as is, okay? But I won't read all of them because I'm not going to read a book to you tonight, but these are almost haiku-length crossouts that interject hope, okay, to my way of thinking, in the middle of the sequence of somewhat dark poems. And why are these poems dark? Because we know that since its construction in 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge has been the one man-made structure that more people have jumped to their death from than any other man-made structure in the world. Somewhere between 1,600 and 2,000 people have jumped to their death off the Golden Gate Bridge. But there is still a lot of hope about the Golden Gate Bridge, and so I hope that when we end tonight, we don't end on too dark of a note. I'm going to open with one other poem from the book, by way of introduction, just to let you see that I can write about something other than the Golden Gate Bridge. All right. The title of the poem is Appointment. 3 a.m. First sleep is done. I sit on my deck, huddled around a coffee cup, giving up its small measure of heat. An agitation scientists would say water and dark beans have only briefly borrowed from the sun before passing it to palms, cheeks, lips, gut. And I too rise and feel the fuel of my flesh drawn back into the merciless engine of the universe. The great pistons of Ursa Major, Orion, Hercules, Cepheus, driving the gears of providence or chance or the mystery whirling between them. I wait for something to move, change color, blink. Not even a wink. In the yard below, no gray aliens peer into windows. No reptilians march up the street rank and file, laser guns readied in scaly-toed hands. Even the town crazy who lives next door has deserted her nude lawn dance, black blades of grass untrampled, erect. I close my eyes and squint, hoping, but I'm no good at meditation. Still, I try to focus on my breath, the bulge in the membrane some say separates this world from another. I only see the emptiness of a church altar, a boy kneeling before candles, their white, unlit wicks. My cup is nearly empty, the coffee cold. I go inside and start over, pour new water, twist on the yellow spitting flame, baptize fresh grounds, once more feel the elixir swimming up my veins like crazed salmon returning to the headwaters where they hatched. Those gods of writhing fire and churning water, spawning their globular clusters of red eggs, living stars. Their black, dilated eye spots, already tracking movement, already searching for the light. May we search for the light tonight. One, God, he thinks, how erotic to pull the cork from the brown bottle, yellow wattles on the label, the first taste when he'd sworn he wouldn't drink tonight. Tilting the glass till wine kisses the rim, then back, he watches the legs curve to the stem, swirling the red slowly at first, low in the bowl, rotating his wrist, stiffening his arm, spooling the liquid higher and faster, thinning pink against transparent surface. Inhaling the bouquet of currant, blackberry, licorice, and oak, he slurps the Syrah, perfectly balanced with Viognier, the way a mountain takes spring snowmelt, chewing water in its mouth of smooth stones, spitting out foam with the scent of life and death rising above the canopy of the forest. He sets down the glass, the pool of wine still beneath his tongue, a full minute before swallowing. Then he tips the bottle to his lips and drinks because, after all, that's what he is, isn't he? A drinker of Viognier, of the world. He gazes around the living room of his North Beach apartment, empty bottles displayed on recessed shelves, books with foxed corners, broken spines and loose pages, speckled with soot from the furnace. The window is a triptych of bridges, the bay, the Golden Gate, the Richmond San Rafael, 3 strands of lights strung across water, like the last silver tinsel pieces clinging to Christmas trees, piled in an alley, reflecting the blinking neon sign from a bar after last call. Business travelers, drunks, prostitutes, all gone, except for one homeless figure, curled like a fetus on a sagging couch, dreaming underwater, air escaping black nostrils in an unbroken necklace, each bubble a hollow bead of sooty atmosphere. Many dawns, some flashing scene of a lover, a truck throbbing through sleep, soft sleeves of sound and blankness steam into wavering slumber. Beside me, your arms, hands, throat, hair go blonde from the sun. One moment under a star turns. 2. Imagine no San Francisco Bay, only golden fir hills shedding rainwater to the river, methodically emptying an inland sea in the east into the nameless ocean, beached a long day's journey west. Imagine cliffs not yet formed that will separate northern tribes from the peninsula left when the earth lifts itself up and the valley cracks and sinks like the center of a cake taken from the oven too early, before the guests arrive. Instead of a horizon-pinned skyscraper-scape, mammoths, camels, giant sloth in herds along the river, a cloud of dust not yet stuck to moist creases on a human face, in the palm of a hand as it grips a spear or cradles a baby's head after it passes from a mother. Imagine 10,000 years later, sitting in circle, bearing witness to the birth of the bay, glaciers melting, the ocean rising enough to reverse the river and flood the valley with sponges, jellyfish, sea squirt, sharks. Imagine the surprise of a camouflaged saber-toothed tiger circling the first village, flint piercing its side, smoke curling through the air like the shed skin of a snake. Of course, you know that 10,000 years ago, the coastline was about 25 miles to the west. And as the last ice age melted, the Native Americans actually watched the bay form by rising 3 or 4 inches a year. And in an entire generation, they would have seen, much of the bay come inland, join the river that emptied the sea that was in Central California during that time. And of course, we may get to bear witness to an even greater rising. 3, every morning, painters climb single file up the catenaries, climb to the top of each tower where the cradles rock between the peninsula and the headlands, the Pacific and the cool gray city. Bust by salt and fog, the bridge's vermilion lipstick smears and fades by sublimation directly into the gaseous state. They apply PMS 173 continually, the anchorage, abutments, bowstrings, paint occasionally dripping and splattering 500 feet below onto the cement balustrades at 75 miles an hour. A bicyclist's helmet, a tourist's wrist, splashes of flame, leaving stains on sidewalks, marks on flesh that turn black and then a permanent gray, proof that they were here, proof that they crossed through the Golden Gate. 4, one harness boot is propped on the bottom rail of the 4-foot fence under light pole 97, the first beyond the south tower on the city side. He points toward Angel Island, Alcatraz, the piers, but all that is visible is bare arm blurring into fog, appearing as one of the muscular cables holding up the roadbed, fading into leaden sky on either side, reminding him of photographs of the half-constructed bridge, towers standing in water, ripped arms reaching out to each other, to each shore, 2 crosses, fleshed out daily by accretion of steel and the street lamp's glow above him, a color midway between moon and setting sun, giving the comfort of one naked light bulb hanging from a frozen barn rafter, the smell of hay mingled with horses in the gelid breeze blowing in from the Pacific, long black hair lifting off his shoulders, whipping around his face, cheeks warming momentarily before he plants palms on the top rail, braces, then lifts damp eyes, turns, and retraces his steps. Rain and spring on slender window panes. Shine, shine. A man in green glasses jogging across the bridge. 5, some fold their laundry the night before, place lambskin sweaters chest down onto the bed, cross sleeves behind backs, turn ribbed cuffs up, sides in, bend cotton bodies into thirds or halves, stacking them neatly in cedar drawers. Some line up ponies and riders on their polo shirts, their underwear devoted totally to bottom shelves. Some never touch heaps of dirty clothing, leave everything for lovers or parents to dispose of. Some type up notes in Times New Roman, poems, diatribes, or bizarre encomiums. Some make videos in drag while drugged on popular culture. Some merely hum as they climb over the railing and stand on the ledge, gaze at the piled-up city, the waves that suck life in through the gate, under the bridge, then out to the ocean again. Seven, God spoke to him through transmissions of old cars, waterfalls, hand saws. calibrated in railroad ties, iron rails singing under boxcars like strings beneath bows of countless cellos. God whispered from the deep-fried oil at Luke's cafe, taught him how to use a steak knife, how to remove a rib from the waitress, showed him an escape route through the garden. In the hospital, there were angels between the walls, sobbing in the water pipes, radiators. They traveled the city in sirens at night until his doctors locked them away behind bars of lithium. Now he stands by the Golden Gate, listens to foghorns on the bay, sea lions billowing up from Pier 39, prays in unknown tongues, casting for some lost chord. Only the wind in the wind, waves in the waves. 9. Without eldritch cry, without unified theory, without threading the camel through the eye of the needle, without analog I, without metaphor me creating a perceived operating space, without detritus, without sophistry, without ribs of organized society, without the privileged moment, without breakdown of the bicameral mind, without Elohim explanation, without thou, without thy kingdom coming, without glossolalia, without scabrous walls, without flowering rods or staffs, they fall into the abyss. Without Zeno's paradox, without vibrating string problems, without abstractions withdrawn from particular examples, without epileptic aura, without symbol or rune, without love knots, without megrim, without absolution, ablution, or effusion, without consubstantiation, without genuflection, without genuine reflection, without casual confusion syndrome, without categorical imperative, without within, without, they fall. Contra Costa has an epigraph. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. The streams whereof shall make glad the city. Isaiah 41 and Psalm 46:4. High on the hills above Niles Canyon, fog collects horse silhouettes. An infinite number of ways to say this gathering of flesh, huddled above the silver river, cleaving golden hills to the east. Fresh waters flowing west to the brackish South Bay, then north where they meet the sea. A riptide opens up the shoreline, page by torn page. Mud sucks at mossed-over beams of piers, swaying with the tides. Red-winged blackbirds singing sunrise, electric blossoms scattered, thistles. And Mount Diablo rises. The Pacific Plate continues feeding the continent through its faults, spitting out graywhack, chert, and shale piled up for bobcat and kit fox to stalk a stray lamb or fawn, an occasional con-colored cougar taking down a full-grown doe before the sun warms its riffling coat. Deep beneath the still surface, waters roil inside the machinery of the estuary, move toward the saline gate, thickening like muscled hindquarters hitched to a plow, leaning into its harness as it passes under the Dumbarton, the San Mateo, the Bay Bridges past Alcatraz, Angel Island, San Quentin. The waters make their final approach, where kite surfers are flying beneath the bridge, catching the wind, lifting the chop, spinning before landing in illegible whitecaps beside a steeply keeled Coast Guard boat. Figures in orange decontamination suits lined up on the deck, circling an imagined point of entry. The black diesel smoke drifting toward the fog, a lugubrious shadow rising. The cutter completing its final circle, then angling back to perpendicular as the waters break through their harness and rush through the gate. I'm looking for the right one to cut in now. I appreciate your patience. Well, I think these are like geranimals, so I'm gonna cut this one in. Sounds good to me. This is never, this is the first time we've done this, so here we go. This is some of the words of Hart Crane. The old gods redescend, stay the night, that you might know some measure of their fate, a spell of tortured hosannas. Winter all spring, and in the autumn prayers disturbed and dense, years drift, one star, one white wisp of myself, a distant hot root, long moan in the sky, cast back the tribal morn, dance out the fire, sprint up the hill groins like a tide. I am going to find the one that I want to read. Here it is. Beyond the gate, swing on, sing on. Somehow phonographs rewind themselves. In the brain, death probing flesh. Myself, a blank window whose laughter is wheezing wreaths of steam. Echoes assembling, searching, thumbing midnight on the piers. Oh, my city, tossed from memory, how far away shall the agony gather? 2 more poems. I'm going to now read the proem to the gate, which corresponds, if you know the bridge, to the proem to Hart Crane's poem, The Gate to the Golden Gate Bridge. How many sunsets have white hairs of fog fallen from the headlands, collected in the gate's throat like fleece beneath a sigh of stars? How many torn moon ears up all night listening for the feverish cries of gulls sweeping vermilion waves through restless shadows? I think of the sepia harvested for ink from octopus, cuttlefish, and squid, how they glow with phosphorescence that reaches its greatest intensity a few days after they are dead. And you, golden blade, surrogate stitch in the continent's deep wound, suppurating your stories out to sea, stories of limestone, ash, and lava. How many times have your waters parted, dissolving into nothing, then starting up again in the life of this shorn planet? How many worlds collided to flood this valley, slice its hills into islands? How many words strung together into sonnets beneath your harp strings, rising like incense, like webs of vines stretching to the mountains to which we look for help, shrouded in burning clouds, smoking by day, glowing by night? How many foghorns pressed into the dark wall of sleep, like swollen seeds thumbed into humus, sprouting to the surface, waiting for the sun, that one faithful fire eye blinking through the mist, searching for its twin, the earth and all its fullness, which turns art to life, life to art, the truest of all lovers. How many nights has your watery bed swayed beneath your broad back? How many days has the bay rolled open its scroll of ciphers, the moon squinting to read the pages of the surf, all in one glance before they fade on a loom of soggy loam, weaving a landscape that is more like itself than itself, at each power of magnification, each level of imagination, twisting like snowflakes in an earthquake, ragged white corpuscles swimming up the bloodstream to the headwaters of the brain where fractals mediate between the amygdala and the Dalai Lama, the pain of wisdom and the ecstasy of speech, the last cigarette and the iron sea. One more. And I'm doing something I said I would never do. That's reading from my computer. But I am, because I didn't print the poem off. This is a new poem. It's going to be in my forthcoming book, Dharma Rain. In fact, it's the last poem in that book. I think somehow it's appropriate to read it as the last poem in this series tonight, because it does give us a little hope. It's entitled To the Fog. And then you wake up one morning to the fog surrounding your house like a heaven, like the first time you drank a whole bottle of white wine alone. You get dressed for your walk down the path that you walk on each day. You look toward the horizon, the shouting sun, now more like moon's soft song, one muted tone behind sky's veil. You notice the lichen-covered stones greeting each step, the geometry of downed limbs scratching at low tide, the snowy egret you surprise, plumed head turned on its side, sweeping the mud flats, improvising a way to catch breakfast in suffused light. All of this and more, normally hidden in plain sight. But an orchestra's warming up behind the curtain, commuters leaning on shrill horns, distant sirens rising, the engines of this world revving up their clear intent to perform something short of a miracle. O fog of morning, hover in the hollows of this day, remain in its low places to rise up again when we need not more, but less. Thank you very much.
Terry, thank you so very much. It was very beautiful. Okay. Now we shall move on to Iris Jamal Dunkel, who also is reading this theme of poetry of place tonight with her book, There's a Ghost in This Machine of Air. And Iris is a poet belonging to a place in more than one sense because she is Sonoma County's Poet Laureate. And if you go to her website, you will see a very impressive variety of activities and projects, and it's just really wonderful, really wonderful. So we're very, very pleased to have her here tonight. Her debut collection, Gold Passage, was published by Trio House Press in 2013, and this is the press that Terry Lucas is editor and founder of. Yes, one of the founders. Okay, and she teaches at Napa Valley College and is on staff at Napa Valley Writers Conference. Jane Mead has said of There's a Ghost in This Machine of Air that it is a sustained, complex, clear-eyed, heartful love song. When Dunkel describes the land as it was when the Pomo cultivated sedge for basket weaving, or the arrival and hardships of the early European settlers, or the Gravenstein apple on which the local economy came to depend, that description is enriched by the spirit of the place as she, a Sonoma County native, knows it. And when she describes the Laguna de Santa Rosa's use as a cesspool in the 20th century, it's within the context of 150 years of disregard for health of the land, making all the more remarkable recent recovery efforts. Now there's a very optimistic note, which is much appreciated. An unusual, beautiful, and powerful book. So I'm very, very happy to introduce Iris Dunkel.
Wow, there's a lot of you in here. Hello. What a pleasure to get to read here, to leave the confines of Sonoma County. They let me out today. I'm going to begin with a poem from Gold Passage because I have a fellow coworker in the room from when I used to work at Cisco Systems, and I commuted from Sebastopol, which was a long drive. There's a reference to the oil spill in 2010, which some of you may remember. the distance between. Grateful for the tree, not just what's airbound, oak trunk, thick enough to thwart cannonballs, black bark, dark tributaries opening arthritically towards sky, but also what's beneath soil's vinculum, uncharted roots, blind animals pushing toward light, toward idea of water, belief it will be found. August 19th, 2010. Dear 206 million gallons of oil. The freeway ashes golden valley like a cross, carelessly smudged on our foreheads. Drive, drive. Some days I log 200 to 300 miles, a long commute to work and back, kids to soccer and minivan. Can't you see there is no bus, no feet to carry the weight of this, no other way? Loom, stalk us like the blob, even when radios stop slopping their electronic tongues, how you bloom and cloud the sea, weeks pour into months. It's not your emotion we are fighting. In you, I bloom too. What have you dredged up from this deep? When I speak about the oil spill, I'm also speaking about the cut redwood trees on exit 116 of Highway 101, how they jut like decapitated bodies in the low fog. I'm speaking of the bright language of orange poppies, state flower, my children's questions about whether or not they're allowed to pick those bright, oily petals, about the earnings report and how we will craft the message to meet market's expectations, then later recraft it to meet employee expectations. Bumper to bumper traffic, stuck, looking at burnt hills, looking through closed windows into grimacing faces. How far away my children's voices sound on a static-filled cell phone call. How sun cuts has sharpened, how even the oaks bend away from its wont. I'm thinking about how to make a story that will broadcast this distance. There was once a sea that blossomed oil until the sea became sick, until we looked into it and we saw ourselves. Now we're going to go to Sonoma County. So the idea behind there's a ghost in this machine of air is most of you probably know about the concept of the ghost in the machine, but the idea that there's something stuck into history to make us stop and look at it again and try to understand what wasn't told in the first telling. One of the great pleasures of being poet laureate is getting to go into the classrooms again. I was a California poet in the school for many years, and now I get to go back as and teach lessons again to first graders and third graders. And one of the lessons I teach is based on 2 poems of my book that look at the first arrival of ships in Bodega Bay and what that was like for the Coast Miwok, and then what it was like for the people who were on those ships who'd been at sea for months. I'm going to read those 2 poems now. The first one is called A Language is a Map of Our Failures. At first, the land was covered in thick redwoods. Their dizzying tops spindled the wool of low fog. They lived in open meadows between trees, close enough to the sea to dream of salt and the muscular bodies of fish. The smoke that rose from the cochas was thick with oil, but the scent still wove together. Fog's breath, rosemary, the burning of wood. The oldest ship appeared out of the fog like a hollow wooden whale on the blue horizon. Then 2 smaller boats skated toward the shore. No fear drifted on the slack winds, even though this was a day when change would begin to rise, ash-like into the air, catching and burning in the branches of the tall trees. The map would show memory's retreat as it bled further and further inland, rocky sand to cliff, to the high meadows where the trees had begun to fall. There would be many more ships. There would be much forgetting until the towns came, a small dry goods store, then a livery and a blacksmith. It was after all of this that the history was recorded, and it was without what had been lost to air, to the eaves of trees. One of the things that I like to talk about with the kids is what it was like to make a passage all the way around Cape Horn and up into Bodega Bay and to land there, and what that would have been like to have been on a ship for that long, what your clothes would have looked like, what you would have smelled like. They like that one. The idea of like helping them feel the empathy for both sides of this story so that they can understand how to tell their own local history stories. So this is from the perspective of the people getting off the ship. Geography as seen from the tall ships. From lull of dank, wet wood and passage, too many bodies pressed together, our clothes bleached and worn thin from sun's glare and wind's incessant blowing. From the sway that had pooled and gathered in us like a brackish bilge until we were unable to understand land, that line of shore defining an end. Then from it, the green hills pouring back into what we were meant to discover. From the weak legs that strode from the small boat into icy surf came uncertainty and doubt, the weight of cargo carried across, then dragged off the ship and over the grassy dunes to the waiting wagons. There were no maps. There were only ideas and a strange man standing by the wagons. Still wet, we gathered again close, but far away from what we knew of ourselves in the rough wood cabs. 2 rutted tracks leading a dusty path out from months of salt and sway over the roll of hills. You're a contemplative audience. I was just reading in Colorado, and they were a little livelier. I'm just saying. No, you're lovely. You're lovely. One of the things I like to talk about in regards to this book is the artwork I got to use for the cover. And it's actually by a woman named Grace Griffith. She was the daughter of Nathaniel Griffith, who was considered the grandfather of the Gravenstein apple. How many people in this room have eaten a Gravenstein apple? Yes. So that's so much better than in Colorado. Everyone's like, I don't know. Is that to describe it? You know, so you got it. You got it. So I'm from Sebastopol. That's all I have to say. You know, that means I have to, advocate for the Gravenstein apple. And I'm poet laureate, so it's part of the contract. I'm just kidding. So Nathaniel Griffith was considered the grandfather of the Gravenstein apple. But little is known that he had 3 daughters, and one of which was named Grace, and she created this amazing, she was an oil landscape artist, and she created all these beautiful paintings of the Laguna de Santa Rosa, where we'll be going next. He also had another daughter who was a horticulturist, and she worked with Luther Burbank, and Luther Burbank asked her to marry him, and she said no. And then the third was Grace Griffith, who was an amazing poet from Kenwood, and she was actually friends with Charmian Kittredge London. So you should check out her work. The Accidental Pool. Nathaniel Griffith brought Luther Burbank to his orchard on the flat marshland of the Laguna. From his home, the trees spelled across the wide expanse in straight rows. Already they were good servants, yielding a ton of fruit each. But the season was short. Burbank had ideas for winter fruits. The winterstein, still bittersweet tasting, but with tougher skin to withstand the frosts. The three girls could see the men on the porch as they sat in the skirt of soft grass surrounding the willow. Spring had covered the grass between rows of apple trees in yellow mustard. They made a game of following the strokes of color, the low freckle of mustard, the high powdery acacia, to the solitary exclamations of yellow iris crowning the front yard. Years later, after Burbank's experimental trees had failed, after their father had died and the green wooden farmhouse had burned down, they would remember this inventory, how that day the golden lines had burned in them a tether to this land, and each day after they would try and pull themselves back. So at the center of this book is a long sequence of poems that, as you mentioned, is about the Laguna de Santa Rosa, which is one of the largest watersheds in California. And it was a very sad story for a long time. In fact, the reason why the poem happened is because a good friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, you want to go for a walk in the Laguna?" And I said, "No, ew," because it smelled like poop, our entire lives growing up. And no one would want to go for a walk there. But thanks to a lot of amazing restorative work, the Laguna has turned into a beautiful park. But when I did, my friend responded to me when I said that. And she's like, "I really think you should go for a walk in the Laguna and see what it looks like now." And I did. I went with her and I went on the walk I'm going to describe to you now. And what I realized was I was walking is no one else remembered the story of how we got here. And I thought, you know what? We're going to make this mistake again if we don't remember the history of what happened here. So that's where this poem sequence started from. This is the prelude, the beginning poem. It's about that walk. Prelude. Begin by walking the cracked chamomile paths. Let the path stretch across a wide, stubbed field. Fill the air with the sound of birds. Fill the air with fat bees and the machine hum of insects. Post-appropriate markers that mark miles, but not the whole truth. Try to contain the fissures of time in each quick step. When you walk under the lone oak that constellates the field like the last visible star, smell smoke. See the ghosts of hundreds of other thick oak trunks that once crowded this space. Hear their lost leaves whispering. When you reach the man-made lake constructed to replace the natural lake, walk the perimeter. Observe the cattails that cage the floating bodies of 7 pelicans that have stopped here to rest en route back to the sea. Look out across the drought-dry field and imagine a chain of hundreds of lakes linking their way back to the sea. Drain them for the good soil underneath. Fill them with soot, fill them again with feces and urine, cover what's left of them in brambles, get tangled in the sticky blood of berry juice. And when you near the last of the water, the floating pontoon bridge, and the sound of children playing baseball in the dirt on the chalked diamond, let a red snake T-bone the trail. Let it open in you a wound that at its center is a mouth. One of the consequences of all of that disruption of the watershed were some of the worst floods that Sonoma County ever saw. And one of the most famous ones completely devastated Guerneville when I was a child in 1986. And this is it's called The 100-Year Flood, 1986, but it starts with a quote from Gay LeBaron, who Sonoma Countyans know as our local historian. She's an amazing newspaper writer, but also historian. And here's the quote. "But people are like that about natural disasters. Everyone believes that the history on any place began the day they arrived." The 100-Year Flood. Memory is as uncertain as islands that rise in a flood. You don't know what lurks underneath. A silver boat can split the seam of water, even gone muddy, gone untold for so long. Disasters rise and stay like high water marks in the unconscious, and each day after is checked against it. What do we have to fear? The worst already happened, couldn't happen again. But the river, like a muscular animal, overtakes the banks, chews up asphalt, rises more to fill stores and homes, until the whole Russian River Valley is filled with her muddy, pulsing body, regardless of what history you remember. I'm going to read a couple more poems. This is a joyful poem for you. This is, I live on an old Gravenstein apple orchard. Prayers for trees. At night, the light rain percusses prayers onto the tin roof of our barn. Prayers not meant for our sleeping minds or motionless forms. They are prayers for those last scattering of pink apple blossoms strewn carelessly across fields, as the gnarled trees stand steady against wind in the wide green field. Prayers for those trees as they thicken with green leaves and gather the promise of tart, ripe fruit. By morning, the storm will be gone, the trees near bare of blossoms, and we will wake without knowing about the prayers whispered in the dark of night. Just wanted to read a couple. I'm going to take you outside of California. Are you guys ready? Okay. So this idea of writing about history actually happened when I was outside of California. When I was living in Pennsylvania, I was teaching at Clarion University. And I missed California. But I had this amazing special collections at the university I was at. And it had all the history of, it's called Oil City, where I was working. So guess what they produced there? And there was a town nearby that didn't exist anymore that was called Pit Hole. Now, if you found a book about a place called Pit Hole, wouldn't you have to write about it? So as soon as I started researching Pit Hole, which was a town that existed for yeah, I know. It's a town that existed for 500 days because it burned to the ground. I know. All these stories started to emerge, and one of the big things that happened was I heard some stories about women who had been entrapped there because there were so many men after the Civil War, and they all came to work there, and there weren't enough women, and so they started. Some of the brothels started tricking young girls to get work in the hotels. And instead of giving them work in hotels, locking them in the attic until they changed their tune about what they would do for money. I apologize. This is like one of the only poems I have with a swear word in it. So sorry. There's a child in the room. Sorry. Okay. This is about one of those girls and how she got out. It's actually a real story. It's a story that's told in the stories of Pit Hole. And it's about a girl that, you're going to hear it, but it's about her way out. It's called Last Evening, Only the Color Gold Could Keep Me. The train moves smooth across the landscape, as if the whole universe were covered in black ice. When he greeted me at the station, I could smell the seat. It breathed through his skin. We took a wagon up the steep hill to the town, if you could call it that, a muddy hill sheathed in newly rutted streets. We got out at a place on First, not a hotel as I'd been told, but a brothel. I could smell the sweat and sin. It oozed into the dark mud. When I screamed, he looked me in the eye and said, "You either fuck the men I bring you or starve." When he threw me in, the attic was lit with gold lace of sun shining through beams. Only the gold can keep me, I think, my mind swelling with hunger behind the locked door. At first light, the room illumes, a dusty box of hats, a dirty mattress curled into the corner, a few sheets of crumpled paper, a pen. So I began the letter to my mother. It was a lie. Please save me. I'm locked in an attic on First Street in Pithole, PA. I fold it carefully, slip it between the slats of the wooden room that contains me, and watch it flutter down to the dark mud. There are so many swollen days, my body gone black and blue. How the letter was found and mailed is beyond me. But one afternoon I awoke, still blurred in sleep and muted by hunger, to hear a thunder of men in the downstairs. I was carved in golden light, like each piece of me would break off into tiny wings. When the door was kicked in, my mother walked in tear-streaked. She gathered me up. Do I have time for two more? Okay. This is the last poem in my new collection, and it's about all those girls. What wears out or up after time? Out of the valley mist that low hollow hangs, out of the moan of thick river ice, pool gone locked. Come melt, come rainbow sheen glistening, come wool of clouds opening up. Out of the forest thins, down hemlock, split pine, up the derrick still sap sticky, up the open-bellied stores and hotels, up the facade and the sea through the cracks, come the war-tired boys, still blind of love, still hungry, still pistol-armed. Out of thirst and holes and mud comes oil. Red velvet curtains gone muddy, creek gone muddy loud, come screams of hairless horses, their burning bodies spelling into the night. Out of the locked-up girls who open their legs because of fists, come something red as cardinals. Out of bread lines and dead letters and lost children, come thick pipes and steel laid down to out. Come spit in your face, come hot breath, come the fold in, the knock down, the every man for himself, the bury it, the get out, the fire that burns to the ground. Come the ashes sifting down. Come the years, the heavy dirt that don't rise till you dig in. Come the buried river still moving. Come the ghosts of those girls, thick hair blossoming. Come the words still whispered from their lips. And I'm going to end with a new poem too. We both are writing pretty intense poetry, so I finally got to see, because I have small children, so I never see movies, I finally got to see The Revenant recently, and I thought it was an amazing film. Anyone here like that film? Some people? Yeah? Okay. Well, the next day, I was home late from working, and I turned on the TV, and Dances with Wolves was on. And I was like, oh my God, like, oh, what a different perspective. And so this poem came up. And I read it just in light of how I don't have to tell you because of where we are, but remembering the history of our country and the violence we come from as a way to have move away from it towards a world of hope. This is called History of the Indian Wars as Seen from the 1980s. Have you seen the one where the handsome white man comes to the prairie? Shiny brass buttons, blue wool coat with no holes, and tames a wild wolf, a girl gone feral. The sun is always shining, skies pressed down blue. How his white teeth glint as he turns the arm of the coffee grinder for his new native friends. Not the face-painted, weapon-yielding Pawnee, a softer, gentler tribe who have put aside his mission, the white, pickled egg of a lie he has swallowed as to why he is there, to befriend him. If you listen closely, you can feel the sound of 10,000 wagons rolling toward them. Over that knoll, where the camera pans, 8-skinned buffalo rot in the hot sun. The flies are gathering. They will cloud and rise. Under a 5-month beard, the truth quivers like a caged animal. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, both of you. What a fabulous night. Wonderful reading. Okay. Whoa. Now, I want to give everybody time to look at and perhaps purchase some of these wonderful books. And we have a special price tonight for people at this poetry reading. So if you're tempted, please give in. And we have lots of brownies at the back table and other goodies, and then we'll get back to the open mic tonight, which we've got 2 people here who are just really prepared for us to wow them, and I thank Terry for his kind words, and I have already told him this, and I should probably share with all of you that on 2 different occasions, years apart. Robert Hass has told me that this is the best open mic that he has attended when he's been here. And so I think Albany can be just very, very proud. And we have such a variety of styles and voices. And I hope that will continue to just be more and more. And thank you so much. All right. So we'll take, 5-10 minutes. It's fine. You can bring your brownies back. Sit. We'll begin reading so we can move along.